a lot of us go into that initial stage of denial where
Right.
we know something's going wrong in our relationship. I'd come back from a work trip abroad, and I'd come into my bedroom thinking, right, I'm going to go to the gym. So I was looking for my hairband and my sweatbands. And I went to my bedside drawer, opened it, and in there I found a contact lens box. Now,
Mm.
I don't wear contact lenses, Tracy. And inside was a big fat false eyelash. And I didn't wear those either. In that moment, I knew my entire world had changed because someone had clearly been sleeping in my bed while I was away.
What do you do when you know something has to change in your relationship, but leaving doesn't feel safe or even possible? Today's guest is someone who has taken all of life's most painful experiences and turned it into a powerful path forward for thousands of people around the world. Sara Davison, also known as the divorce coach, is a world-renowned expert in breakups, divorce, and emotional recovery. She's a multi-award winning coach, a twice best-selling author, and the host of the Heartbreak to Happiness podcast. With over 30 years of coaching experience, Sara has helped people navigate everything from high conflict separations to rebuilding their confidence and identity after heartbreak. What makes her work so powerful is that it's not just professional, it's personal. After going through her own devastating divorce, she's created practical tools and strategies to help others move through that emotional roller coaster and come out stronger, clearer, and even more aligned with who they truly are. So she's also the founder of the International Divorce Coach Center of Excellence, training coaches in over 30 countries. So her impact is truly global. Sara, I'm so grateful to have you here today.
I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you, Tracy, for inviting me on.
I want to start today's conversation with the moment no one really talks about too much. So when everything looks fine on the outside, but inside you know something isn't right in your relationship, how can someone trust that feeling without immediately blowing up their life?
Such a good question because a lot of us go into that initial stage of denial where we know something's going wrong in our relationship. Maybe in my case, I'd come back from a work trip abroad, and I'd come into my bedroom thinking, right, I'm going to go to the gym. So I was looking for my hairband and my sweatbands. And I went to my bedside drawer, opened it, and in there I found a contact lens box. Now, I don't wear contact lenses, Tracy. And I thought that's strange because my side of the bed is the side of the bed where you kind of have to shimmy down between the curtains and the bed, right? It wasn't sort of the other side where maybe someone could have dropped it, got put away. It wasn't that side. And I opened it up, and inside was a big fat false eyelash. And I didn't wear those either. So in that moment, I knew my entire world had changed because someone had clearly been sleeping in my bed while I was away. However, that denial process, when you don't tell anyone, is something that I completely understand because I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my mum. I didn't mention it to my husband. And a lot of people will be thinking, well, why not? It was we don't to open up and start talking about things until our body is ready to cope with it.
All right.
So it might seem strange if you've not been in that situation, but it's a really normal response, a trauma response to that initial shock when you've got to process it. And it's almost like your body's got to catch up with the reality and get you into a position. Because if you start vocalizing it and talking about it, then it becomes a reality. So it's almost like you sort of go into a bit of shock and then you're in that denial phase, which is why we quite often are in that initial phase where we're thinking what's going to happen, but we're not quite ready. And in those moments, it's really about taking the pressure off and allowing yourself just that safe space and, looking after yourself. I think a lot of us will then dive into various coping mechanisms, whether it's a glass of red wine or it's, a bag of chips, or if it's, maybe smoking, drinking, sometimes we throw ourselves into work, which can seem to be a healthier response. But if there's no balance, that again can be stressful too. Yeah, it's about looking after yourself, I think, and creating a team around you of people that when you're ready to talk, that they can answer the questions that you've been worrying about. But looking after you, self-care isn't selfish. And a lot of us,
No.
especially us busy working parents, Being putting ourselves at the top of the list and looking after ourselves first is really unnatural and feels selfish, but it's actually essential.
Right.
So self-care in those early days, as you know, is super important.
Absolutely, absolutely. So your life has is about to blow up. Don't react right then, I think is what you're saying, right? Take your time, sit with it, think about it, look at your options, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, ready to take action, then that's fine too. It's just, I think it's get your ducks in a line. If you're thinking about leaving somebody, especially if it's a toxic relationship, which means that it's unacceptable behavior, maybe there's some abuse, maybe it's unhealthy in ways, and if you confront them, it may escalate your risk or it may
Right,
escalate
right,
the conflict. Then again, it's about getting your ducks in a line and working out, do you have some money put aside that you can use if you're suddenly they say, right, get out, or you find that you have to leave for a reason? Is there, a bag packed? Have you thought this through? Like, where are you going to go? What is your safe space? And also, who would you have on your breakup support team? So, do you need legal advice? If you do, who would that be? And you can even go and get an initial consultation. It doesn't mean you're going to get divorced because you speak to someone that understands what the
right.
legal process might look like if you have to go down that route. But what it does is it gives you clarity. And clarity gives you power. It gives you power because instead of putting your head in the sand, which is normal, by the way, and going, I don't want to look at this because it's scary and it's going to mean massive change and ultimately massive emotional pain, probably financial pain. I just don't think I can cope with it. That clarity will give you some power, whether it's legal or financial. That's key. And then also making sure you've got a support team that are going to look after you. Some even well meaning friends will feel just as betrayed as you do, potentially by the relationship breakdown. So they may be angry with your ex, which is fine to go around and have a night with them because obviously we need our friends. But actually, for your breakup support team, I'd recommend not having that bestie on your team because unwittingly, they may put fuel on the fire for you, which may
All
lead to
right.
consequences. I had a client that came round for her first session and she popped over the trunk of her car and she had all these bin bags in there. She's like, look, look. She's always, I don't know what you guys call them over there, but the bags you put your trash in. And she'd filled
Okay.
them up with his clothes from his wardrobe that he'd chopped them up into so many little pieces that she'd chopped them. And they were like proper coats, like camel hair coats and leather shoes and things. And she literally, her and her best friend had gone to town the night before over a couple of bottles of wine
Mm,
because he cheated on her and he now moved in with a new partner and it was all very difficult, understandably really tough. But sometimes friends like that are so emotionally involved that they're not thinking constructively. So make sure you pick someone who can give you constructive advice, who maybe is a little bit more emotionally removed from the situation so they can look after your best interest. Because ultimately, chopping up their clothes is not going to be in your long term best interests, even though it might feel good
right.
in the moment. So, yes. So, again, that's important. And then making sure that you look after yourself by having like an exercise buddy or a dog walking buddy
Mhm.
or someone that's going to come round to your home and actually get you out of the house or signing up to a class or getting a new hobby, but something that you do with somebody, which means it's not up to you whether you go or not. You've got an accountability because I think that
Right.
also helps. And then if you want a coach or a specialist therapist, and again, that can help too to talk through your feelings. Don't bottle them up, to sort of cope with eating or drinking. Talk about it and see if you can find some peace by talking about it and finding some options to move forward in a constructive way.
Beautiful. That answered my second question. A lot of women feel like divorce means failure, shame, or starting over from scratch, right? So,
Yeah.
how do you help someone reframe it so it becomes a turning point instead of something that breaks them?
Do you know what? This is such a really interesting question. Yes, there is a lot of stigma around divorce and a lot of shame, and I felt it. I had a global business with my ex, and there were 200 staff, and pretty much 199 of them, it was just me and my PA that didn't know about the affair. So it was huge embarrassment and shame, and they'd known for months that he was having an affair. And I literally and my PA were the last to find out. So and we were relatively well known in our industry. So, and family and friends, and it just felt like a failure. It felt like a massive failure, which I never thought I would ever have. The interesting thing here is that, yes, in that initial moment, you will potentially feel those feelings. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to flip it on its head because if you think about it in a different way, which is really true, which is actually the reality of this situation, is we've been conditioned by society to see that if that marriage fails, then we are a failure, especially as women, right?
Right,
Now,
right.
ultimately, if you look at what happens to get through a divorce process, right, you're going through telling everyone the embarrassment, the shame. You're also probably, in a lot of cases, single parent overnight. So you then got to manage conflicts. You've got to manage telling the child. You've got to manage parenting a child on your own, sometimes with an ex that helps and co-parents. And very often in the personal clinic that I have with my clients, exes that do not want to be involved or want to make your life as difficult as possible, as the narcissistic abuse route, where the post separation abuse actually accelerates and gets a lot worse post separation. A lot of people don't understand that, don't realize it. It's one of the biggest misunderstandings that we have, I think, especially through the family court system, that people do not realize that actually abuse, just because you're not living with them anymore, it can escalate emotionally and financially and psychologically when you're not with them. It's
Yeah.
also 30% of domestic homicides happen within that first 3 months of separation. So
Wow.
again, there's a huge risk factor. So as a woman coming through that, or even a man, but to get through that divorce, if it's not been something you wanted and you've been catapulted out, and even if you've chosen it because it wasn't right, to survive living on your own, managing your emotions, dealing with waking up at night, panicking, or maybe not being able to sleep because you're overwhelmed and worrying. Maybe you're, trying to bath the kid while you're trying to not show you're crying because you've just had a letter from the other side, which is threatening your house, your lifestyle, your access to your children. Then you've got to carry on and work, whether you work for yourself, whether you've got a job, whether you're needing to find a job now under all this amazing pressure. Plus, you've got friendships that break down because they can't cope with what you're dealing with. People let you down, not necessarily because they're not nice people, just because they are not in a place emotionally to support you at that point. So it's very isolating. It's very lonely. It's an emotional roller coaster. There's a lot of tears, a lot of fear, a lot of overwhelm. And you develop skills for survival that you wouldn't have had. And people that haven't walked that path will never learn. Because when you're faced with, I've got to get myself up out of bed because I've got children, or I've got to get to work because I've got to put money in the bank because I need to
Right.
pay for things because now I'm on my own. Maybe you're moving house. Maybe you're renegotiating conditions with your workplace because you don't have the childcare support anymore.
Right.
All those skill sets that you have mastered in that divorce process make you a blooming superhuman.
Yeah.
Those are superhuman skills. This is another level of talent, of being able to diffuse conflict, either with your children arguing or with the lawyers or with the ex that's going for you, maybe the ex's family, your in-laws. You've got all that you are managing
Mhm.
single-handedly through this time period, which seems to go on forever and ever, and in a lot of cases just does go on forever and ever. So I would say that if you're going through a divorce or you're getting through, you are building an incredible skill set that most humans don't
Right.
have. It's a survival toolkit for life that makes you stronger, more confident, and having that knowledge that if you've been through that, you can get through anything.
Anything.
Because the curveballs and the roller coaster that are thrown at you, especially if you're divorcing a toxic ex, like
Mhm.
that is underestimated vastly, the pressure and the stress that puts someone through. If you've got through that, you are incredible. You have an amazing strength. Even though I know you might feel battered and broken, you might feel like life is like a grey cloud over your head all the time right now. Please see that you have come so far, not through choice, but it's almost like putting glass under pressure. You get the
Right.
diamond at the end. That's what you
Yeah.
truly are. And that
Awesome.
is when the point
Yes.
comes, you've got to make a decision. Do you let this be a grey cloud over your head moving forward? Or do you say, screw you, watch this, which is my motto, which is like, I am not going to tolerate. It's not necessarily screw you to your ex, although that feels good sometimes, but screw you to the old you. Screw you to the you that thought you couldn't
Yes.
or you shouldn't. Screw you to the one that tolerated the bad behavior or the unacceptable things that happened in your life because you didn't want to upset anyone. Screw you to the person
Right.
that just said yes no matter how badly it made you feel. And now watch this, is that lighting of that fire in your belly to go, I can turn this around. I can take my power back. And I don't maybe know exactly where I'm going, but I'm going this way and I'm going to design it just the way I want. Because at this point, it's a golden opportunity to redesign your life just the way you want
You
it,
want.
not the way that other people wanted it or told you it should be. You can should all over yourself. It's not going to get you anywhere, right?
Yep.
We've got
Yep.
to get clarity on where do you want to go, because you can't move towards something you can't see. It's really important we hear that. You can't move towards something you can't see. So
Mhm.
create the picture, throw color on that canvas or shine a light
Yes.
into what may be a black hole to illuminate it. Now, it may not be, may not end up being the final destination, but let's give you something to aim for to get you out of that front door, to get you dreaming bigger, because this is your opportunity now. So, yes, some people might say, aren't you embarrassed? And yes, I was embarrassed. And someone wrote on my social media, I mean, I get a lot of slightly barbed, should we say, comments on my social media. But one of them was, aren't you embarrassed? Like your husband left you for someone 12 years younger who's beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, it is embarrassing. But if it helps one person, me speaking out, rather than keeping my mouth shut as everyone wanted me and thought I would do, if
Uh-huh.
I kept my mouth shut, not said anything, and still not had the voice that had been taken away from me for many years being in an abusive relationship, if this helps one person, then my job is done. Because that is how we take our strength and we pay it forward. That's how you turn your power, your pain into your greatest superpower. And that's actually my motto. Actually, I've actually written 5 best-selling books now. I think my bio
Wow.
must say but this is my full one. Screw you,
Screw
watch
you,
this.
watch
How to
this.
recover from
Love
toxic
it.
relationships. And
Love
it's
it, love
all
it.
about how to take your power back if you are navigating a toxic divorce or break up of a relationship. It doesn't have to be a
Yep.
divorce. But I think it's an interesting question about, is there shame? And yeah, but we can alchemize any pain into a real gift. And to be honest, my ex-husband is the gift that just keeps on giving, and
Give
it
it.
just keeps on giving. And I go, bring it on. Because every time you do something or I got a challenge that I've got to jump over, I think, okay, what can I learn from this, and who do I get to become? Now, this doesn't mean that I don't do a bit of the being upset or hurt or derail for a moment, but it's the boomerang effect of how quickly you start to bounce back when you've got the tools. You don't stay in those dark places. You go, okay, I see this for what it is, picking myself back up. And now what? Watch this. The screw you, watch this is the most empowering motto that I could ever have dreamt up. And it keeps me going every day. And I use it in my coach training school. I train coaches. Most people, Tracy, that train with me have been through some kind of breakup, difficult breakup. And that's why they have that purpose and that passion to go out and pay it forward and help people and create a really decent revenue stream as well. Why not? It's part of the watch this. I can alchemize what you did to me into something that makes me
Yeah.
feel good, that helps others, and creates me a revenue stream. I'm doing it. So
Right?
that's kind of what I would say to that question, I guess.
Yeah.
Long
Love
answer.
that.
Sorry. There's a lot to say on that.
Love that. So true. When you're talking, again, I've been through that as well, but I'm
Yeah.
curious, somebody that's listening might be thinking, okay, they're in the middle of it. They're not at that point yet that they, feel the confidence to leave, or if you've been battered down just emotionally, right? You feel worthless, told you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're not capable. How does that person find the strength to make them take that
Yeah.
move?
Yeah. And it's really hard to leave a toxic relationship. On average, it takes 7 attempts to leave, because what happens is the cycle shows that, it can. Remember, we fall in love with the perception of who this person is, not the reality, but who we thought they were, which was amazing, which is charming and fun and generous and kind and all those things, right? But then the mask slips over time. So what happens is, an incident will happen which will upset you. You'll pull away because it's abusive, you don't like it, and then they'll hoover you back in, either by telling you you're crazy and you're an idiot, or by telling you that they're sorry and they got it wrong, only to get back to a sort of status quo where you hang on thinking, great, I don't want to say anything because I want to rock the boat again and go backwards. So I'm going to embrace where I'm at, and I'm just going to carry on. And hopefully we're back to where we started, and it's not going to happen again. But we know it's a pattern. So if you're
Absolutely.
going through that, that's why we stay, right? Because we think it's going to get better. So I think it's about asking questions of, what could I do and what could it look like? Because if a lot of people will feel, I don't have the money, I don't have the resources, I'm isolated, all very well-known abuse tactics. That's what they do so that it's harder for you to leave. I would reach out and speak to your local domestic abuse charity if you have one. I know in the US you do have them. We have them here in the UK as well. So you can reach out and get advice that's confidential from somebody that can do a risk assessment for you as well, which is important. We've got to make sure that you don't put yourself at risk. If you suddenly announce you're leaving, then that can escalate your risk. And in 30% of the homicides that happen within that first 3 months of separation, 80% of those murders, there was never any physical violence before. So it's important to realize that you're not necessarily safe because they've never hit you or hurt you before. It can easily escalate upon separation. So, with that in mind, it's about getting your ducks in a row and working out, do you have a pot of money? Do you have a bag packed? Have you got a plan for where you might go? And is it safe? And how can you, if you've got children, get the kids away too safely? So, it's about planning without having that conversation. And then when you've got your plan in place and you've got things in place, you've then created that future, a little bit of clarity, which makes it easier to then leave. Whereas if you haven't got a bad pack, you don't know where you're going to go, you haven't got any money saved up, then things become more difficult. Doesn't mean you can't do it then. And if it's an emergency and you're in a huge amount of danger or you just can't take it anymore, then again, the emergency services and the domestic abuse charities are there for those situations. But if you think you can put a plan together, that's where I would start. And find someone you can trust, the charities you can trust, not joint friends with your ex, however nice they are to you, just somebody that's just on your team and doesn't speak to them, doesn't communicate with your ex or your partner if you're still with them.
Right. Beautiful. Yeah. That's exactly what I did. I found the woman's shelter. I made the plan. I had the bag packed. I had a plan for my son. Like everything was, this is the time. Like we knew when it was time to run. Right. So
Much control as you can in a situation where you feel completely out
safe.
of control
Yes.
and powerless. But that's the
Absolutely.
thing, the question to ask, whether you're in the relationship or when you're out of it, healing from it, is what can I control?
Right.
Because a lot of my clients will say, Sarah, they're messing me around on pickups. They're supposed to come pick the kids up. And one of my clients recently was like, I take my son to football and he takes my daughter to this other class that she goes to, but they're at the same time. So I need him to come, but he doesn't show up on time. So therefore both kids miss out. So, but it's, sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. And then I'm left trying to get one kid to football, one kid to another class, and I can't do it. So I said, well, what can you control? And she goes, well, I need to tell him to turn up. She said, but I've tried that. I was like, no, that is one thing you certainly cannot control. Cannot control your ex, what they say, what they do, what they think, what they're doing next. None of that. But what you
Yeah.
can control is maybe finding someone else that can take one of your children to that event. And there was somebody that could take her daughter to that particular class because they went past the house. And she was like, well, can you pick my daughter up on the way? If her dad's already picked her up, I'll say, yeah, he's picked her up. But if not, pick her up. And then he can still have the access. We're not saying he can't have the access. We're just saying
Right.
putting the children first. She's going to get there. The kid's going to be happy. So that was something she could control where it seems
Nice.
like you've got no control. So it's finding things like that that you can identify that make your life easier without rocking the boat.
Very nicely said. Okay. If somebody wants to work with you, they think, you know what? I need to work with Sarah. I need help. How can they
Yeah.
reach you?
So you can visit my Instagram page, Sara, which is Sara, Sara Davison Divorce Coach. And I put videos up every day. So that's always useful, like tips and advice. So you can get information there for free. I also run free online support groups. Every week, there's an online Zoom session that you can come on, find your tribe, ask questions from my coaches who run them. I've trained them in my training school. If you'd like to train as a coach with me, I actually have a downloadable guide, and that talks about how you can turn your heartbreak into a career as well. So
Nice.
I can
Nice.
send you that. But you can find more information on my website, saradavison.com. And then on my podcast as well, Heartbreak to Happiness. So
Yes. Beautiful. Okay. Good. Love that you have the free help for people. That is fantastic. So everywhere, if you're suffering, go take advantage of that. My
yeah, I
goodness.
do. You'll find, especially if you're in a relationship where you feel like you've
Mm,
been isolated, it can really make a huge difference. So yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's so important. So do you have a favorite resource or guide where like a place for someone to start that you would recommend?
This book, Screw You, Watch This, is actually a really good book for anyone. It gives you all my tools. So again, if
It's
you are in a
okay.
toxic relationship, that's a good one. My other book, Uncoupling, which was my first book, that's about, if it's not a toxic relationship, then uncoupling will help you navigate those early stages and regulate your emotions. And just kind of giving you a bit of a guide to how to look after you whilst everything else is changing in your life. It's really important to get that help. It is out there,
Yes.
but I would say my free online support groups are a great way to start. And if you want to speak to somebody, you get one of my top coaches runs those every week. Super friendly, very welcoming. We'd love to see you. We have people from all over the world, all different backgrounds and stories. So you'll be looked after, welcomed, and you'll get a lot of help and support. So Yeah, you're welcome.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. One last question. Is there anything you want to make sure someone listening today hears?
Yes, I would say it's not what happens to you in life that defines you, it's what you do about it that makes you the person you are. And if life is throwing you curveballs and you're going through a breakup or a divorce or a bereavement, or maybe if you're dealing with other traumas in your life, know that it's not what's happening to you that's going to impact the rest of your life. It's really what you choose to do with that. And you can turn, sometimes some of the most painful moments in our life can actually turn out to be the greatest gifts. So I know with hindsight it's easier to say, but if that gives you some hope at the end of the tunnel, then I hope that helps.
Thank you for listening to the Conversations That Heal. If something in this episode helped you feel seen or gave you one small thing to try, that's your next step. Start there. If you want more, check out this video next. Stay well, and we'll see you in the next Conversation That Heals.